clearly as well. Okay. If you find it difficult to hear me, do let me know at any point, and I will inshallah try to see what we can do. Thank you for joining us for this course. Inshallah, in the hour that we have today, we want to talk about two things. The first is the nature of the ghaiba of the 12th Imam. We often say that our Imam is an occultation, for he is in ghaiba. Well, what does it mean that the Imam is an occultation? And the second question, which I think is a very important question as well, is what are the reasons for why the Imam is in occultation? And here I will point out to you that there are actually two distinct questions that we will be analyzing separately, inshallah. Before we do that, I just want to look at the etymology of the word ghaiba itself. The word ghaiba comes from the word ghaib, referring to something that is hidden from sight. And a thing can be hidden from sight for a number of reasons. And for us, it will be important to determine today what is that reason for why the 12th Imam is hidden from sight from us. Now, the word ghaib, according to our scholars, is like a homonym. A homonym is a word which has a number of meanings, or rather you can say these are different words which have the same spelling. So the best example, or one of the examples I could think of in English, is the word bear. The word bear can be a noun referring to an animal, but the word bear spelled the same way can be a verb referring to bearing witness, for example. In other languages, you also have examples like that. For example, in the Farsi language, when you use the word sheer, sheer could refer to milk, sheer could refer to a lion, sheer could refer to a tap as well. The word ghaib is very, very similar in this sense. It is, it is a word that has multiple meanings. And therefore, looking at the antonym of ghaib, the opposite of it, which in this case is zuhur, will be very important to us. Now, you find that the word ghaib is contrasted to a number of ideas. First, it's contrasted to shahada. Shahada meaning something that is observed, something which is witnessed. It is also sometimes contrasted to hudur, right? Hadir and ra'ib. And hudur meaning presence. And then in the case of the 12th Imam, it is contrasted to zuhur, meaning something which is apparent. So we're going to look at some of these other meanings as well, and hopefully put the meaning of zuhur and ghaib into context, inshallah. Now, just a little bit of a very quick history to put things into context for us. We know that the Imam has two periods of occultation. The first period of occultation is known as al-ghaiba al-sughra, the minor occultation, and the second period of occultation, the one which we are in right now, is known as al-ghaiba al-kubra. You will see that the Imam himself prefers to call the second period of occultation al-ghaiba al-tamma, the complete occultation. And this will come up in one of his letters that we're going to be looking at today. The minor occultation starts upon the death of the 11th Imam, the passing away of the 11th Imam in the year 260, and lasts for about a good 69 years until the year 329. And the Imam had about 4 representatives during this time, and he would communicate to these representatives. And one of the ways that he would communicate to his representatives is through the tawqi'at, through letters. And these letters were known as tawqi, or known as tawqi'at as well. And the representatives of the Imams and some of the people who were close to the representatives, they knew about these letters, and they also recognized the handwriting of the Imam. So for example, one of the Representative Ahmed bin Uthman al-Amri, he says a signed note, a tawqi, was issued from, and the handwriting of it was well known to me as well. Some of our great scholars have also received or claim to have received tawqi'at from the 12th Imam. These scholars include Sheikh al-Mufid and Sheikh as-Saduq as well. Now, upon the passing away of the fourth representative, a few days before he passed away, the Imam sent him a letter, and this was the last letter. And in this letter, he gives him some important guidance. And it seems to me that this is not only guidance for him, but it is also a guidance for the scholars as well, and guidance for the Shia community as well. We have a question here. Where are the letters at the moment? At the moment, we don't have access to any of these letters. They were kept with the people who received those letters. Some of them may still have survived, but we do not have any letter at the moment where we can claim that this letter is actually one of the tawqi'at of the 12th Imam. Now, coming to the last tawqi that he sent to his fourth representative. In this tawqi, the Imam shares some very important points. So let us read it together. The Imam says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya Ali ibn Muhammad as-Samuri, أعظم الله أجر إخوانك فيك. May Allah increase the reward of your brothers and your companions upon their mourning and their grief for your passing away. فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ مَا بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ سِتَّةَ أَيَّامٍ. Because you are going to be passing away from the time that you receive this letter and 6 days. You will be passing away in 6 days. فَاجْمَعْ أَمْرَكَ وَلَا تُوصِ إِلَى أَحَدٍ فَيَقُومَ مَقَامَكَ بَعْدَ وَفَاتِكَ. Now organize your affair, put them into place, and do not do wasiyah. Do not appoint anyone as your successor, or do not do wasiyah of your will to any particular person, lest that person occupy your position as the representative of the Imam, because there is not going to be a fifth representative. And the Imam فَقَدْ وَقَعَتِ الْغَيْبَةُ التَّامَّةُ. The complete occultation has now occurred. Okay, and that's the terminology that the Imam uses in this letter. فَلَا ظُهُورَ إِلَّا بَعْدَ إِذْنِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Now there is not going to be my return, my appearance. People will not be able to see me except after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows for it. And this is going to happen وَذَلِكَ بَعْدَ طُولِ الْأَمَدِ وَقَسْوَةِ الْقُلُوبِ وَامْتِلَاءِ الْأَرْضِ جَوْرًا. This is going to happen after a very long period of time. One, it's going to happen after the hearts have become hard. And we'll see today that one of the reasons, or perhaps one of the benefits of the ghaibah, is that it tests the faith of the believers. And after the earth has been filled with tyranny and oppression, وَسَيَأْتِي مِنْ شِيعَةِ مَنْ يَدَّعَ الْمُشَاهَدَةِ. And there will come a group of my Shi'as who are going to claim that they have seen me, that they have observed me, or they have met with me, or they have spoken to me. ألا فمن ادعى المشاهدة قبل خروج السفيان والصيحة فهو كذاب مفتر. Alas, the one who claims to have seen me before the rise of the Sufyani and before the loud call that will happen from the sky, then such a person is a liar and such a person is a fabricator. Now this raises an important question, obviously, for many of us, and it raises an important question for our scholars as well. And that is it possible to meet with the Imam and to see the Imam in the period of occultation? If you say, yes, it is possible to see the Imam, then how come this letter has such strong language about those who claim to have seen the Imam. And if you say, no, you cannot see and meet the Imam, then we have so many stories and narrations, some of them coming from great scholars about people who may have met with the Imam. I do not wish to get into this discussion today, but generally what our scholars do point out is that people are able to meet with the Imam, but they are not allowed to claim that they met with the Imam. They are not allowed to claim that they got a message from the Imam. So even great scholars, for example, when Sheikh Abbas al-Hummi in Mafatih al-Jinan, he narrates a story before the ziyarah of Jami'ah. That's a story which is a famous story about somebody who met with the Imam. You may want to go and read that story. At no point you will find that he claims that that person met with the Imam. Or at no point does he mention the name of in that general story that he narrates. And therefore, it may be possible for people to meet with the Imam, but they're okay, we're back. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Okay, so at that period of time, the major occultation begins. When is the major occultation going to come to an end? We do not actually know when the major occultation is going to come to an end. That knowledge is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I just want to use this opportunity very quickly to share with you another important point about the occultation of the 12th Imam. There is a lot of interest I see in our community to know about the signs of the zuhur of the 12th Imam. And a number of times people will ask questions about some of the signs of the zuhur and whether we are observing these signs of zuhur, the rise of Daesh and the black flags, and there are a hadith about that. The death of a king by the name of Abdullah, we have a hadith perhaps about that. The rise of the Sufyani, is that happening in this day and age or not? A number of questions have been raised about that. There are few things for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not told us exactly when it's going to happen. The first is our death. We don't know when we're going to die, and it may happen suddenly. The second is the day of judgment. If you look in the Quran, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does talk about some of the signs for the day of judgment and some of the things that will happen before the day of judgment. But you also find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not delve a lot on those signs. He doesn't spend a lot of time describing those signs for us. And the third thing that we've not been told when exactly it will happen is the coming of the 12th Imam. Now when it comes to the day of judgment, there is one important message in the Quran. God says the day of judgment will come to you baghtatan. Baghtatan meaning suddenly. Baghtatan meaning when you don't expect it. Baghtatan meaning it will just happen and it will just occur upon you. When you think that this is not the time for it, then is when it is going to be happening. This is the term used in the Quran to describe the coming of the day of judgment. And there is a very important moral lesson that God wishes to impart to us. Whenever you read the descriptions of the day of judgment in the Quran, do not get lost in the description, and you will find that God will not give you a lot of description. Instead, try to take away moral messages from it. The whole description of the day of judgment in the Quran is there only to give us moral messages and to give us some theological messages as well. The moral message is, since you don't know when it's going to happen, then you have to be prepared for it as if it is going to happen tomorrow. What is interesting is that in the ahadith that we have from the Ahlul Bayt, we're told that the coming of the 12th Imam is also going to be baghtatan. It's going to be sudden, when you least anticipated, when you least are anticipating for it to come. And therefore, the moral lesson to take away from that is that we need to be prepared for the coming of the 12th Imam as if it is going to happen tomorrow. As for when it's going to happen exactly, we do not know. The ahadith, and we have some ahadith which say, كذب الوقت, particular time, meaning it's going to happen in 10 years, it's going to happen in 20 years, or those who set a general time, it's going to happen in this lifetime, it's going to happen in the lifetime of the next generation. Such people have lied, or at least what they have spoken is not the truth. So we don't really know exactly when that is going to be happening. Now, here is when I want to talk about the nature of the ghaibah. And before we get into... Can everybody hear me okay, or is the sound still breaking? Okay, so just give me a minute. Let me try to reposition myself, and inshallah, we'll see how that fares. Can you hear me okay now? Okay, Alhamdulillah. Okay, so we're now going to start talking about the nature of the occultation of the 12th Imam. And before I enter this discussion, I just want to give the credit where the credit is due. These discussions have been taken from some of the research done by Sheikh Muhammad Ali Shomali, and I've tried to incorporate some of his ideas into this discussion. And you will find that it does put a number of things into context for us. So generally what I want to do right now is I want to contrast the concept of ghaibah and zuhur, the concept of zuhur to the concept of raj'ah, to the concept of nuzul, and that is going to help us to understand the nature of the ghaibah itself. Now, one of the things that we do know is that upon the coming of the 12th Imam, there are some other human beings who have passed away, who will be coming back to life to join the movement of the 12th Imam, or after the movement of the 12th Imam. And this is known as the concept of raj'ah, or the return of these people. The concept of raj'ah itself, according to some of the scholars, I believe it was Sheikh Al-Mufid or perhaps Sheikh Al-Saduq, they have even claimed that this is one of the daruriyat, the essential messages of the madhab, the essential principles of the madhab. Now, it should be clear over here that there is nothing in the Quran that actually conflicts with our belief in the raj'ah itself. There are verses, for example, in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that on the day when we shall raise a group of people from every community and bring them back to life. In some of the hadith of our Imams, they have said that, well, this cannot be referring to the Day of Judgment, because on the Day of Judgment, we are going to raise the entire community and not just a group from that, a nation or a group from that community. Also, you find many examples in the Quran where people have been brought back to life. We have examples from the time of Prophet Musa, mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. In fact, Surah Al-Baqarah has been given that name because of that purpose, because of that story. We have examples from the time of Prophet Isa, and we also have other examples in the Quran as well. There may be difference of opinion amongst the scholars with respect to, who will come back to life. It will be the believers. Will the Imams come back? Believers will come back. But the principle itself, that there are some people who will be coming back to life, seems to be a sound principle within the Shia madhab. Now, the concept of raj'a, and this is what I'd like you to keep in mind now, the concept of raj'a is used for people who have died, people who have passed away, and now they are being brought back to life. And the concept of raj'a, however, is not used for the 12th Imam. So that makes it very clear that the Imam is alive and has not passed away. Okay. Secondly, we also have the concept of nuzul that is going to happen during the time of the 12th Imam. Another person who will be coming back to aid the movement of the 12th Imam is, of course, Prophet Isa. But the terminology used for Prophet Isa is also very different. On one hand, the word raj'a is not used for him because we do not believe that he passed away. On the other hand, the word zuhur is also not used for him. It is different. The word used for him is nuzul because the word used for him being raised was rafa'. And this word rafa' appears actually in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. Rather, that is what it seemed to them. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised Prophet Isa to himself. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. Which means that he was alive and then he was raised. Meaning the soul and the body were raised. Now, where were they raised to? What is the nature of the raising? We may not understand that, but it would imply that the body of Prophet Isa is perhaps not on this earth, it is somewhere else. And therefore, when Prophet Isa does come back with the 12th Imam, the word used for him is nuzul, meaning coming down back to the earth again. But that is not the terminology used for the 12th Imam. So this now helps us to put it into context. First of all, the word raj'a is not used for the 12th Imam, which implies that he is very much alive. Secondly, the word nuzul is not used for the 12th Imam, which implies that he has not left the earth. He is on the earth itself, which then helps us to understand that the 12th Imam is leading a very normal life, like every other being. He is very much alive, he is very much on this earth, and very much a part of the life that is happening on this earth. Then the question comes up, then what is the meaning of ghaiba, and what is the meaning of the zuhur of the Imam? And our scholars explain that here ghaiba means that people cannot recognize him. When they see him, or if they meet him, or even if they speak to him, they will not recognize that this man is the 12th Imam. And the example that they give is the example of Prophet Yusuf. When his brothers came to him, they could see him, they could talk to him, they could be around him, but they did not recognize that this was their own brother, Yusuf. And therefore, there are some scholars who pointed out that when the 12th Imam reappears, you will find that a lot of people, or some people will say, I remember seeing that person. I remember seeing him in Hajj. I remember seeing him in this place. I just did not recognize that this person whom my eyes could see was the 12th Imam, or was the Imam of the time. And I think this now demystifies the whole concept of ghaiba in relation to raj'ah and in relation to the nuzul of Prophet Isa. Which brings us to the second part of our discussion for today, the reasons for the ghaiba of the 12th Imam. Now, here I want to break down the discussion into two parts. And it will be really important for us, it will be very important for us to be able to break down this discussion into these two questions. The first question is, why did the Imam go into occultation? Being in occultation is not the natural state of things. Being in occultation is abnormal. Why did the Imam go into occultation, and what are the benefits of it? The second question is, why is the Imam remaining in occultation? And as I will point out to you, the second question has not been posed correctly, or the second question has not been understood correctly. Now, we know that the natural state of the Imam is to be present amongst his people. And this allows the Imam to fulfill his political and his spiritual role. So there are a number of ahadith that actually answer this question. And I'm going to share with you three of these. But before I share these ahadith with you, let me point out a discussion that the Imam had with one of his companions. In this particular discussion, a companion of the Imam comes to the sixth Imam and he asks the Imam about the 12th Imam. And the Imam says to him that the 12th Imam is going to have a long period of occultation. This companion, he asks the Imam, what is the reason for why the 12th Imam is going to be in occultation? The Imam says to him, we're not allowed to share the reason with you. We cannot divulge it to you. This will remain a secret. Now, the important point I want to take away from this is that even though I'm going to be sharing with you a hadith for the reasons for why the Imam is in ghaiba, these are not the actual reasons for why he is in ghaiba. These are some of the benefits. These are some of the secondary reasons, and the actual reason shall remain unknown to us. Now this particular companion, when the Imam says this to him, he becomes insistent. And he says, well, at least explain to me the wisdom behind why the Imam is in occultation. So when he asks about it, the Imam gives him a reason, and I'm going to be sharing with you that reason a little later on. But then the Imam also says to him, it is like the story of Musa and Khidr. As long as Musa was with Khidr, Khidr alayhi salam did not share the reasons for why he was doing what he was doing. It is only when the two wanted to part, that is when Khidr shared the reason, and Prophet Musa understood the reason behind why Khidr was doing what he was doing. Similarly, right now, we will not completely understand, and that is a part of the ghaiba, that we're not able to understand the actual and the complete reasoning behind it. But when the zuhur happens, that reason is going to be shared with us, and we will be able to understand it and appreciate it at that time. So there is a reasoning behind it. But besides this hadith, now we have a number of ahadith that give us two or three different reasons why the Imam is in ghaiba. The first one is on the slide in front of you. Inna lil ghulami, the young man, is going to have a ghaiba, a moment where people will not recognize him. قبل أن يقوم, before he rises. قال قلت ولما, this person says that I say to the Imam, why is he going to have this period of occultation? قال يخاف وأومأ بيده إلى بطنه. He said that he is afraid, and with his hand he pointed towards his stomach, meaning he is afraid for his life. Now, this may raise a question for you. Why is the Imam afraid for his life? We have never heard of an Imam who was afraid to die or afraid to sacrifice his life. We look at the example of our first Imam, our third Imam, and all of our Imams. They were willing to sacrifice their lives. Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, he gives a good explanation over here. He says that he's not afraid for himself, but he is afraid for his community, because there is no other Imam coming after him. There is no other savior for humanity who's going to be coming after him, and therefore he is afraid that if he was to be killed, then there would be no one to establish justice and peace on the face of this earth. Another reason mentioned in the hadith for the occultation of the 12th Imam is that when he's ready to rise and he's ready to make his stand, at that time he will not have given bay'ah, or no one will have assumed that he has given bay'ah and allegiance, or he will not have had to tolerate the oppression of the oppressors. So again, a hadith from the 6th Imam, قال يقوم القائم عليه السلام, the 12th Imam, or the one who will rise, وَلَيْسَ لِأَحَدٍ فِي عُنُقِهِ بَيْعَةٌ, and no one will have claimed that this Imam has given allegiance to me. Yet another reason mentioned in the أن الله عز وجل يحب أن يمتحن الشيعة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes to test the faith of the Shia. Someone is saying that the sound is breaking up. What can we do to improve it? I would recommend perhaps turning off or recommend closing some of the programs that you have in the background. That might be able, that might help you. And also moving closer to your Wi-Fi connection might help you as well. The third reason for why the Imam is in Ghaiba is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to test the commitment of the Shi'as. And we have got many examples of this. If you look at the example of the Ghaiba of Prophet Musa, it is interesting that a number of prophets have had a Ghaiba from their people, a period when they were separated from their people. One of the examples given to us in the Quran is the example of Prophet Musa. Now we know that Prophet Musa was only separated for about 40 days from his people. But just look at it from the perspective of his people. When they were expecting him to come down on the 30th day, and he did not come down on the 30th day. On the 31st day, from their perspective, their Imam, and let us not forget that Prophet Musa was their Imam was in occultation, one. Secondly, they did not know when he was going to come back, whether it would be in 2 days or in 10 days. In fact, in their case, they weren't even sure if he is alive. Some of them may have started to even doubt whether he is alive or not, and they did not know the reason for why he had not come down or he was not with them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains to Prophet Musa that one of the reasons why we're holding you back for 10 more days is because we want to test your people. So our faith is also being tested during this time as well. And therefore, this is a dua that we have been recommended to recite during the period of occultation. It's a very famous dua taught by the 6th Imam. Allahumma arifni nafsak, فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف نبيك. Oh Allah, I would like you to introduce me to yourself and help me to understand you, because if you do not do that, then I will not be able to understand and recognize and know your Prophet. Oh Allah, help me to understand and to recognize your Prophet, because if you don't do that, then I will not be able to understand and to recognize your Imam. And oh Allah, help me to understand and recognize your Imam, for if you do not do that, then I'm going to go astray from the right path. The companion actually asked the Imam that if I am myself in that period of Ghaiba, and I am afraid of losing my faith, then what should I recite or what should I do? And the Imam said to him, one of the things that you ought to do is to recite this particular dua. Now, let's sort of answers the first question that we raised today. And that is, why did the Imam go into occultation? And why is he not amongst his people in a way that they can recognize him and that they can take guidance from him? But this brings us now to the second question. Why is Imam still in occultation? Why is the Imam not reappearing? And here, as I said to you earlier, I feel that the question itself is misplaced. We are more focused on the reappearance of the Imam. Whereas when you look at the ahadith, and if you have been paying attention to the ahadith that we have been reciting and reading for you, the focus is not on the reappearance of the Imam. The focus is on the qiyam of the Imam, the rising of the Imam. When the Imam takes his stand, the Shias who lived during the times of the other Imams, they were anticipating that any of the Imams may rise, that that Imam, may be the Qa'im. And therefore, so often they would come to the Imam and they would ask him, are you going to be doing the Qiyam? When are you going to be doing the Qiyam? Why are you not doing the Qiyam? That was the more important question that they had in mind. And I think that that is the question that we ought to be asking about the 12th Imam as well. Not why he is not reappearing, but the question is, why is he not making his stand? Why is he not rising? Because when the conditions are right for rising, obviously the Imam is going to reappear as well. And therefore, as I've stated in this slide, why is the Imam not initiating his Qiyam? Now, there are a number of ahadith that actually blame the faith and the ethics of the believers for why the Imam is not rising. Um, and these ahadith are important for us to take a look at because it shows us that we first have to improve ourselves before we expect special mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there are a couple of ahadith that I want to draw your attention to them. One of these ahadith you may be familiar with, the other one you may not be familiar with, but these are important ahadith in trying to understand. I'm going to be very particular in the wording over here, trying to understand some of the reasons for why the Imam is not making his Qiyam. The first hadith is narrated by the people of Kufa, and they had come to visit the fifth Imam. And when they came to visit the fifth Imam from Kufa, you know that the time of the fifth Imam was a unique time during the lives of our Imams, the fifth Imam and the sixth Imam. During that period of time, you notice that the Bani Umayyah are waning in their power, and the Bani Abbasids have not risen to power, and that there is a power vacuum at that time. And so this person comes to the sixth or the fifth Imam, and he says that we have many followers in Kufa. If you were to command them, they would rise and they would follow you. Then why are you not making your Qiyam? We can make a Qiyam together. In this case, the Imam asks him that, are there people in your community that whenever they have a need, they can go and put their hand in the money bag or the pocket of their brothers and take what they need from the pocket of their brothers, and the other brother also thinking that if this person has come and taken some money from me, it must be because he needs it, he must be in need, so let him have it. Does this ever happen in your community? And the man says, no, such a thing does not happen in my community. So the Imam says to them, فَهُمْ بِدِمَائِهِمْ أَبْخَلْ. So when it comes to giving their lives and sacrificing their blood for each other, obviously they're going to be even more miserly as well. You are not ready for my Qiyam. I do not find the followers that I need for me to do a Qiyam. That's also the same message that the sixth Imam gives to a group of people who came from Khurasan. And again, they came to him and they gave the same message to the Imam. They say to him that we have a lot of people who are willing to accept you as the leader, and they're willing to fight on your behalf, and they're willing to make a stand on your behalf as well. Then why do you not make the Qiyam? And in this case, the Imam says to him, sit down, and one of the companions enters at that time, and the Imam first tells this person this person who's come from Khurasan, he tells him, why don't you go and sit in the oven? And he says, Yabna Rasulullah, if I've said something wrong to you, or if I've done something wrong, I ask you to forgive me, and I ask you not to punish me by putting me in the oven. And the Imam says, very well. He asks that companion who's entered, he says, why don't you go and sit down in the oven? The companion goes and sits down in the oven. And then the Imam starts talking naturally and normally with this person who's come from Khurasan. And this person after a while becomes agitated. And he says, what is happening to that companion who's sitting in the oven? And the Imam says, well, why don't you go and take a look? And he goes and he sees that person is sitting comfortably inside the oven. And the Imam asks him, how many people do you have who are willing to obey my commands the way this companion is willing to obey my commands? And he said, we don't have such people. The Imam said, then you're not ready for my rising. Now, both of these ahadith, they demonstrate one point, that the Imam does not have helpers, and the Imam does not have companions, and the Imam does not find that need for justice, desire for justice within his companions and within the people who wish to follow him. That desire has not yet developed. And therefore, instead of looking at, well, why isn't the Imam coming? The question is turned around and asked, well, why aren't we prepared for it? Khaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi, he's one of our great, and he's a scholar with a philosophical bent to him. He explains the reasoning behind the ghaiba, and I just want you to read this quote with me. Before we go into this quote, let me just explain some theological points about the Shia belief. One of the important arguments that our scholars have for why there have to be prophets is something known as the Qa'ida of Lutf. It's known as the principle of divine grace. Now, this is an important principle for Shias and even for Mu'tazilites as well. And it's perhaps one of the most important arguments for why we need prophets and why we also need Imams as well. I'm not going to go through the details of the argument, but they argue that the presence of prophets is a divine grace. It is a lutf. Every lutf is incumbent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something that we make incumbent upon God, but rather something that God's essence makes incumbent upon him. And therefore, the presence of prophets is incumbent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this line of argumentation is then also extended to say the presence of the Imams is also incumbent by the lutf and by the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the normal state. Therefore, it raises an important question. The question that it raises is, well, if it is incumbent upon God, then why is the Imam in occultation? Why is the Imam not with us? And it brings about a very important philosophical point. It says that on one hand, God is generous, but on the other hand, we also need the capacity to accept that generosity. The best example I can give you is of rainwater. When it rains, the skies do not hold back their rain. They don't hold back the water. But we can only acquire as much rain as the capacity that we have. A person having a bucket of 1 liter will acquire 1 liter of rain. A person having a bucket of 2 liters will acquire 2 liters of rain. So it depends upon our capacity, and God gives us according to our capacity. And therefore, in certain cases where you find that the lutf of Allah or the mercy of God is not coming down to us, it is not because God lacks in mercy, but because we lack the capacity for that mercy. And that's the point that Khaja Nasiruddin Tusi is trying to make. So he says that the occultation cannot be attributed to the choice of Allah or the 12th Imam. Rather, you must find the reason for the occultation within the deeds of the believers, which is the cause of their fear and disobedience, or which is caused by their fear and disobedience. And the reappearance will become incumbent once the need for the occultation is removed. Now, to some extent, you would agree with me that this does answer the question. To some extent, it doesn't answer the question. We look at the example of Imams. In one hadith, for example, the Imam says, if I had 5 people, or if I had 40 people who were committed to me, I would rise. And you can say that today, of all the Shias that we have people amongst them who are committed. We have scholars, we have Maraji of Taqlid, we have sincere believers who have gone above and beyond the commitment that was required of them. When you look at some of the wars that have been fought recently, the commitment that has come from the believers to defend other believers is amazing. The stories that come out of their commitment, there's absolutely no lack in their commitment. There is no lack in their sincerity. There is no lack also in their understanding of the Imam and understanding of the goals of the Imam. Then the question is, if the Imam is just looking for 40 or he's just looking for 313, don't we already have those 313? And if we have them, and if they are present, then why is the Imam not rising? So before I answer that question, I want to put that question back to you, and let's see what are some of your thoughts on this issue. So interesting question. Are the 313 all from present time? Um, it would imply from the hadith that they are present at the time of the zuhur of the Imam, and that when the Imam calls out, they will be responding to him. Whereas the hadith says that they will know the Imam has come, and their next few steps will place them very close to the Imam. I've not seen a hadith that say that they will come back to life and then they will join the Imam. Um, but there are a hadith that may imply perhaps some of them may not be from present time, some of them will come back to life. But regardless of that, if you say that they may be even from the past as well, then the question becomes even more difficult to answer, because then you have to explain, well, over 1400 years as a community, we've not been able to develop 313 people who can fulfill this role. It is just a waiting game. So the question is, well, what are we waiting for? Perhaps they are yet to be born. I remember seeing a hadith that some have claimed that even mention the names of this 313. And I don't think there's much credence to that hadith. But the point I'd want to make from that is to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not picked them because those are their names. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pick them because of their qualities and because of their attributes. And then the question is, well, don't we have enough people by today who have these qualities and these attributes? And if they are there, then how come the Imam is not making his qiyam? Isn't it supposed to be a certain number of men, women, and children, like the perfect combination? Yes, there are some women who also will be part of it. As one of the hadith mentioned, there will be 50 women as well who will be a part of it. But then the question still remains, don't we have than that who are ready? Okay, so Brother Ahmad from Mississauga, I think is making an important point there when he says that it's not only about the 313, but it's also about the rest of the Shia community, and not just the rest of the Shia community, but the whole of humanity wanting what the 12th Imam wants for them as well. And somebody mentioned some other reasons as well. So I think we're now starting to understand an important point over here. The reasons that the Imams have given in the ahadith, these are only a part of the reason. If you want to use technical terminology, this is juz'ul illah. This is a part of the reason and not the entire reason. So one of the scholars who clearly explains this is the late Shaheed Muhammad Baqir as-Sadr. In one of his books or one of his lectures, he actually delves into this issue and he asks the very same question that we're asking you right now, that why is it that even though we have so many committed followers, that the Imam is still not rising? And he says that you have to look at the goal of the Imam. And he points out two important points in the goal of the Imam. First is that the movement of the Imam is a global movement. It's not a local movement. The Imam is going to spread peace and justice around the earth. Now that would not have been possible, say, 1,000 years ago. We had not discovered the entire earth, or people had not yet discovered the entire earth, or there was no ability, for example, to spread justice and peace in the entire earth the way it is possible today. The second thing that he mentions is also very important. He says that it's going to be a movement. It's going to be a revolution. Sometimes there is a misconception out there that when the Imam comes, he's going to subdue people, force to his submission, force them to expect to accept this utopia and to accept this idea that he has. And the reality is that is not what's going to be happening. Yes, the Imam is going to fight against the leaders of arrogance. He's going to fight against the oppressors. But when it comes to the general population, people who neither fall here or there, he's going to try and include them within his movement. He's going to create a revolution. And to do that, their hearts have to be ready as well. So on one hand, yes, the Imam does need his helpers and he does need them to be committed to his cause. But on the other hand, he also needs a level of acceptance, a level of preparedness from all of humanity. As Shaheed as-Sadr himself points out, he says that towards the end of time, before the coming of the 12th Imam, humanity will be so tired of the wars, will be so tired of its failed experiments, that it will be yearning, some of them consciously, some of them subconsciously, yearning for a divinely appointed leader who would spread peace and justice at a global scale. And so he says that, look, for the Imam to come, you need all of these conditions to materialize. One of the examples that he uses is a very relevant and an example that helps us to put this into perspective. He says, look, before the coming of the Prophet to the people of Mecca and Medina, centuries had passed. And you could ask that, why didn't the Prophet come to them a century before or 2 centuries before? The Prophet had the quality and the ability to change them. The Prophet could have turned them into a civilization much earlier, before, for example, they engaged in so much morality, before they engaged in or before they engaged in so much violence and aggression. The Prophet had the ability to be able to change them. But then he says, but at the same time, you also needed a capacity within the people as well, a desire for that change, a desire not just in a few people, but all of them in general. For example, when the Prophet of Allah came to the people of Mecca, the people of Medina, after a while, were willing to accept the Prophet. Why? Because they had grown tired of the wars that they were fighting, of the violence that they had, and they were yearning for a divine leader to come, or a leader at least to come and intervene, because they were not able to come out of this cycle of violence, to intervene and bring peace and justice to their lands. The Prophet of Allah, after he conquers Mecca, you find that the tribes of Arabia are entering into the folds of Islam because there is a general desire within them to enter into the folds of Islam. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا. So it wasn't just because there were a few people who were ready but also generally the hearts of the people of Arabia were prepared for the movement of the Prophet, for the revolution of the Prophet, for this thing that the Prophet wanted to achieve. And therefore he says that, well, it's just not enough for us to have 313 or to have a certain number of committed believers. Also, the general understanding of humanity and the hearts of human beings also have to reach to a point where they grow weary of the state that they're in and they desire for justice that comes from a divinely appointed leader. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here, inshallah, for today, and we're going to open now the forum for any questions that you have. I would prefer that we keep our questions to the discussions that we've had right now, and then if there are no questions about that, then we can ask other questions about relating to the 12th Imam. Sister Fatima Kara from Gatineau is asking about the book Qa'im in the Quran. I've read parts of it, but I have not read it in its entirety. So at this moment, I cannot provide you with a comprehensive opinion. But inshallah, if I do manage to read the book, I will inshallah share the opinion with you. What are the moral values behind the concept of raj'ah? Perhaps one of the concepts that we have in the Quran is that alaysa insani illa ma sa'a. Man will not acquire anything except that which he works for. Meaning, one, he has to put effort, but two, you will acquire what you're working for. The one who acquires the dunya, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him with the dunya. And the one who acquires or wants the akhirah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him with the akhirah as well. There are some believers who've desired, and they've really desired to see peace and justice around the earth, all over the world. And their desire is very strong. They've worked for it. The only thing that separated them from this reality is death, right? In hala bayni wa baynaka al-maut. Oh Allah, if what comes between me and my Imam is death, not my desire to help him, not my commitment to help him, but rather something called death which has separated me from my Imam, then oh Allah, I ask you that you raise me from my grave so that I see that thing which I have been working for. And therefore, one of the moral values behind perhaps the Raj'ah itself is that these human beings who've worked so hard to create a just society, they have created justice within themselves, justice within their families, they've established justice within their communities, and they have a desire to see global justice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to people that thing which they are working for, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them what they are working for. It provides names and locations and descriptions of all the 313. I don't think you even have to look at the sanad of the hadith to realize that the Imams would never do something like that. I think generally when you look at the way the Sharia or the way the Quran deals with things, it never makes certain, in the sense that it never makes the day of judgment certain. It never makes certain who is going to paradise and who is going to hellfire. It gives us the principles, but it makes it certain. Each and every human being to work hard, and it wants each and every human being to work in the now. This is the general principle of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. You would find it very difficult to understand why the Ahlul Bayt, for example, would mention the name of the 313, so that a person looking at that list would say, well, my name is not mentioned in there. What are 5 specific actions that each and every aspiring Muslim should focus towards preparing the Imam? I'll share with you 3 specific actions. The first you are doing right now, and that is increasing our ma'rifah of the Imam. And by ma'rifah, I don't mean the details. For some of you, I've pointed out to you, there's a difference between ilm and aql, between knowledge and intellect. Knowledge is information, ma'lumat, details, and it's important in its own place. But intellect is the ability to understand that knowledge. Intellect is the ability to understand principles. We don't just want to know information about the Imam or information about our deen. We actually want to have an understanding of the deen. And that begins, if you remember the dua that we recited, that begins with our understanding of God, and then our understanding of the Holy Prophet, and then our understanding of the Imams and the 12th Imam. So the first is understanding of the religion. Second is practicing the religion, doing our wajibat, staying away from those things which are haram. There is no excuse, or there is no alternative for practicing the religion. Many a times when companions would come to the Imam and they would claim that they love the Imam would say that one of the conditions of love is obedience. إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله. If you truly love God, then follow me, obey me. God will love you as well. So obedience is necessary. And then once we have built our understanding and we have solidified our commitment to the faith in practicing the faith, then the third thing that we need to do is now to create a just society within our families, and then branching out to our community, and then branching out to our society, to make a positive difference in our society, to do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar within our society, to create and to show that we have that desire to create that society that we want the Imam to come and create for us. Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, the whole reasoning behind his movement, he would say, was that I want to demonstrate that we have a desire for a just community, for a just society. And, by showing this desire, we are preparing and paving the way for the coming of our 12th Imam. So let me share then with you 3 things. The first one, an understanding of the religion. The second one, practicing the religion. And the third one, establishing a just community or a just society. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you all for joining us this morning. You will notice that my slides have a lot more information than a regular PowerPoint. These slides are meant to be not only used for the presentation, but also used as notes for your future reading. I believe the slides will be put up online as well. So inshallah, I hope that you will refer to it in the future as well. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our efforts and make it one of those efforts that is in line for the preparation of the coming of the 12th Imam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us amongst the followers and amongst the helpers of the 12th Imam. And we also pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the reappearance of our Imam. Jazakumullah khairah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.